Alright, turning all the stuff on here. I don't know why I say anything. I end up fucking cutting all this out anyway. How's it going, boys and girls? This is another Watch Me Work video. I'll do a little bit of talking and explanation, which usually turns out to be a lot of talking and explanation, making sort of running commentary as I go along. Project that I'm working on is our Birds of Prey fan series. Birds of Prey is a DC Comics property. You have the internet right in front of you. You can go look all this stuff up, which is my way of saying I'm not going to be throwing up fancy graphics during this thing, even after I re-edit it. Birds of Prey features Black Canary and Oracle. Black Canary is a character that appears on Arrow, though their version of Black Canary is not super authentic, or well, it's authentic as it's DC. It doesn't follow the comic books very accurately, other than sort of the Sonic cry. After they got to the second Black Canary, the first one had like a little device. Anyway, it's a little bit of a mess. And then in our thing, we feature Oracle, DC comic character from mid 90s probably. I don't remember the exact time until a few years ago, and it was basically Barbara Gordon who'd gotten paralyzed and became an information broker, sitting in a wheelchair, sitting at a computer, doing a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of I don't want to say controversy around it, although I guess it could be. She got paralyzed in a comic book that wasn't supposed to be canon. It basically was kind of an imaginary side tale, but for whatever reason, they decided to keep it, which is probably a discussion, a whole side discussion that's happened many times on the interwebs. I don't feel qualified enough to get into the reasons why they decided that they needed to do it. But a couple people whose name I'm spacing on right now, so I apologize, decided to sort of rebrand her as Oracle as opposed to just have a Barbara Gordon character, formerly Batgirl, who was paralyzed. Anyway, this is a lot of rambling about a thing. We are doing a fan series. It's 5 episodes, 4 or 5 minute little episodes of Black Canary and Oracle. Black Canary's out on a mission, Oracle's back at the base, and they banter. It's a little bit of action. It's mostly wordplay, bantery humor type of stuff, not slapstick comedy as much. I guess there's probably a little bit of Archer in it because I watch that a lot. So that influence is probably going to be pretty overt, other than the actiony bits that Archer does really well. So, and we're live action. So I decided, instead of giving Oracle banks of computer monitors like you always see on TV for all these different people, I was going to give her some smart glasses that had little holographic sort of hood projections in them, Iron Man style. And I thought that that was going to be relatively easy to do. And for someone who works in special effects normally, it probably is. But for me, it's not. So I've been struggling over the last couple of weeks, week and a half or whatever, trying to figure out how to do it. Having some knowledge, but not like that super in-depth knowledge. It's like, yeah, I know that tracking software exists and all that. I edit and do color correction in a program called Davinci Resolve, which I really like using. And I decided I would use this opportunity to try to learn Fusion, which is their little After Effects plugin, basically, or the version of After Effects. That didn't work out as well. So all the previous videos up until this point are me struggling through Fusion. I understand Fusion concepts. I'm comfortable using nodes, for example, though sometimes I hook them up in the wrong order and I have to look up how to hook them up in the right order, and there are things I like about them and all that. They have actually really good tracking software. DaVinci Resolve's tracking software, as far as I've done, I did an old web series and they did kind of a Pleasantville effect. Pleasantville is a movie, you can look it up. But basically Pleasantville had these scenes where some people were, or the scenes themselves were in black and white, but a character would be in color, or a thing would be in color, or something would be in color. And I was able to do that in Resolve with their tracking software and a bunch of keyframing, and come up with something that actually looked really good. So I'm confident they're able to do stuff, but I've watched a lot of tutorials, and basically I wasn't able to ever figure out how to do three-dimensional kind of layering like what I'm able to do in After Effects. part of this, in fact, most of it, is the fact that After Effects has this user base that's been around for 20 fucking years or however long it's been around. And there is a bunch of tutorials, like a bunch. You can type in After Effects tutorials and probably have like 3 million tutorials on the YouTubes. You can absolutely get a tutorial for any specific little nuanced thing for the most part, provided you come up with the right Google terms or search terms basically to sort of plug in there. Fusion has none of that. Even their more in-depth tutorials that I found were for the full version of the program from several years ago. The full version part isn't that big of a deal now because I've used enough of the Davinci Resolve version of Fusion that I'm kind of able to extrapolate which nodes they're actually talking about. Most of the controls are the same, they just kind of have a different graphic interface. So that part of it wasn't as big of a deal, as I just couldn't find anything remotely current other than generic tracking stuff on Fusion, the new version for replacing a license plate or popping in like some text graphics over a thing, all the normal shit that you would use it for, and that's great. But what I couldn't figure out was getting things more three-dimensional, I guess. So, because we're all visual, nice hissy S there, because we are all visual people, this was about the best that I could get with Fusion after a week and a half or more of doing stuff. So we've got these little holographic glasses. I generated a bunch of different random text elements. I couldn't get it to work very well memory-wise, so I ended up having to sort of export some of them out into film clips and then just reattach the film clips, which I think is sort of a version of pre-composition in After Effects, but not really. I don't know that there's anything in Fusion that sort of behaves like a pre-comp in After Effects. Maybe there is, I don't know. But that was about the best I can do. And this doesn't look horrible. It looks fine. And I, in fact, talked about it in a couple of the tutorials going, I don't need this to look like a fucking Avengers movie. It's a fan series. I want it to look good. But if people are going to be watching this and turned off by, oh, look at those holographic things don't look realistic enough for me in this fan series that literally had no budget. We spent $50 to $80 a day feeding cast and crew. Always feed your cast and crew. Everything else was volunteer. We constructed these glasses, but the glasses were a pair of cat eye glasses. John, my business partner and sound guy, his wife had a bunch of old glasses. So this was one of the frames, and we bought some of this EL wire right here, which is basically like fiber optic wire with colored plastic over the top of it. We rigged that up. These wires go back through the arms of the glasses and then down her back, and there's a little battery pack in the wheelchair that she's sitting in that powers it and lights it up. And I originally thought that that would be cool in order to do tracking stuff in it, not fully understanding that, well, duh, you need fucking little tracking marks on stuff. I didn't think about that as much. I'm like, I can grab this or grab that and track that way. Didn't turn out to be as easy as I thought it was. Part of the reason I'm realizing is whenever I'm defining an area to do tracking in, I usually accidentally captured part of her eye. And then when that eye started moving around, the tracking software basically was like, fuck! And that was the end of that. This is okay. But I finally broke through the little stubbornness, because we're all stubborn, and a few days ago said, you know what? I'm going to take this into After Effects, where I had already kind of started it before that when I decided to go to Fusion. So I've gone back and forth on this. And I'm going to see what I can do in After Effects, because I watched a couple of, in searching for tutorials for Fusion, found a couple of tutorials on After Effects on how to do HUD graphics on things. And I was like, you know, this shit looks a lot better than the shit that I can do in Fusion. I'm not going to say that things Fusion can do because I have no idea what Fusion can do because I don't know how to use it that well. So I found a couple of tutorials, which I've lost track of at this point, and sort of adapted and did them in order to create the version, the thing that I'm doing now. So this is out of After Effects. So as you can see, not only are the graphics more dynamic, which I'll get to in a second, but everything looks like it's separated out forward, I guess from your perspective, forward from her face, instead of just sort of one plane sitting flat. So I couldn't quite figure out how to get those multiple planes popped out on Z angles as well as I could in After Effects. As for the graphics themselves, I created one of the little things on the side here. I'm like trying to get it while it's in motion. I created one or two of these little bars on the side here, and the glasses themselves, and everything else I grabbed off the mighty thing that is the internet. So I can give partial credit to that. There is a dude named Roland Hartman who has a site called Graphic in Motion. I'll put up a link. I think it's graphicinmotion.com. And I pulled a HUD package package. I pulled a HUD package that he had that had a fair number of these things in it. Not all of them, a fair number. I don't know specifically which ones because I pulled them from two different sources. I was able to, because they were raw After Effects files, manipulate them. So for example, these two circles right here, those I think normally were compass things. They had 365 little lines and maybe little slightly longer lines every 5 degrees or whatever it was. And I manipulated those into creating these large bar things that were more readable for what we wanted to do. And I grabbed some of those. And then there was another dude I found on Motion Cafe, Gregory Villian, and I don't know what his Motion Cafe thing is, but he also had some really neat HUD graphics that were free, and so I snatched up all those. His were slightly more problematic. Gregory, if you're watching this, they were great. Animation-wise and stuff, they're all great. They had a font that I didn't have, and even though that font was included in the package that I downloaded, which was nice of him, I wanted to use a different font. So I don't know how to, and I'm not even sure you can actually, do a group or a global sort of find and replace of fonts in After Effects. You can do it in InDesign, but Adobe created all these programs separately and have since been trying to integrate them together into their suite. So you end up with hotkeys or shortcut keys that do different things in different programs, even though the same program, different programs may have the same function, for example, but the hotkey for it is different in each program, which you can reprogram and all the rest of that, but it's kind of aggravating a little bit. And then there's functionality built into, they used to be super specialized. So Illustrator, for example, vector-based graphics, and then you had Photoshop for photo manipulation, then you had InDesign for multi-page document design, books and whatnot, and of course Premiere for editing, After Effects for special effects work. And then people didn't want to learn two different programs because we're fucking lazy. So somebody would get Photoshop and they're going, I'm going to work around this way to do like several different posters all connected together. Same thing with Illustrator. You'd figure out how to lay out like brochures of maybe 10 pages in Illustrator by sort of illustrating each page separately or whatever. And then Illustrator went, oh, well, people are using it for that anyway. We might as well add these different artboards. And the artboards are kind of cool now because you could do, it helps you with branding things for smaller projects. So you could essentially do a postcard and then a different postcard and a couple of different business cards and be able to drag your vector logo onto all of them. And fundamentally it works out okay. But you know, when you're in Photoshop and you are manipulating text, for example, you theoretically in Photoshop might be doing a title treatment or some kind of special effects text. You don't really want to try to like typeset in Photoshop unless it's a single page. You kind of can typeset in Illustrator. It's a little better, but it's still kind of a pain in the ass. Where you really want to typeset any kind of multi-page document is in InDesign because that's what it's built for. So people started editing in After Effects, which, bless you if you're one of those people that edit in After Effects, but holy shit, would I not want to edit in After Effects. What a pain in the ass to do any kind of editing in After Effects. That's the rant on how these things are sort of like sandwiched together and whatnot. And I'm not even sure why I got on this originally, but you'll see that's a common theme where I sort of go down a path and then forget where the fucking road is. So I saw a tutorial to do this, or to do HUD graphics in general. And then I grabbed some HUD graphics and then I pieced everything together. And that's basically what I'm going to use now. So they look way more dynamic than the other ones that I was using. And it's an easier workflow because I'm more familiar with After Effects. And I do like learning stuff, but there's a certain point where you got to set it aside to get the project done, or you realize that it's more of a time investment than you initially thought. I like learning new things, and I will teach myself new things. I learned how to color correct in Resolve. It took me like 8 months off and on. I couldn't call myself a professional color grader because there's workflow things that I am not privy to because I haven't ever done it professionally. But in all the theoretical stuff, how to set up your contrasts and how to apply LUTs and all the rest of that stuff mechanically, I know how to do. Sort of the same thing with this. What'll probably happen is a few months from now, actually even on this project, I'll go back into Fusion to use it for a different thing, and I'll end up learning more stuff about it. I am going to use Fusion to do the motion stabilization. There's also some scenes where she's sitting at a computer. Here's a filmmaking tip, boys and girls. So we've got a camera in the foreground towards you, and it's the back of the monitor, the edge back of the monitor, and then she's sitting here. And we're crammed into this corner because I was kind of dumb. Like, we should have just moved everything out from the wall, but I didn't. There was a little crawl space back there. I set the camera up in a way. And then what we didn't realize at the time, because it was so minor, is when she types, the table was jittery. Can I even make it do it? Yeah, there's a little jitter for you. The table was jittery. And then this old Mac monitor that we were using, this janky piece of shit, it would jitter. So what it had were these little vent lights on the side of it. So it had this rounded edge, and there were these lights cut into the side of it, and they looked really fucking cool. And I got a reflection off of the lens, the equivalent of kind of a lens flare, but as opposed to a flare, I got kind of a duplicate set of them. So they looked like these cool sort of double lights, and so the look of it was really nice. But they jitter. And I was like, I don't think that'll be that big of a deal. And then I'm watching, I'm like, holy shit, is that noticeable? Like, everything else in the frame is still, and she's like doing her typing, and these things are just fucking shaking. So I'm going to have to make them not shake. The problem is that I can't make them not shake from a like motion stabilization point of view, because it will fuck everything else up on the frame. So I will at least have to mask them and then potentially motion stabilize them, and that might work. I haven't messed around with this. My thought is what's probably going to happen is I'm going to have to find several seconds. I'm going to have to find 1 or 2 seconds of where it's not jittering, and either use that as just a still mask, although the grain and stuff will look kind of weird on that. You can tell when things are freeze framed in movies because of the grain that exists. There's obviously less grain to no grain in digital stuff if you want to try to take it out. But more than likely what will happen is I'll find a couple of seconds in between takes, or as I say action, or as I turn the camera on before I say action. Sometimes I'll say, sometimes the lines will be over with, and I won't say cut, because that helps me get some kind of reaction shot out of the actors. Most of the actors I've worked with are pretty professional in their respect. Until they hear cut, they stay in character. So she's done with the line she's supposed to do, and then they kind of just do stuff. But every once in a while they hesitate, and they're like, is he supposed to say cut here? Oh shit, I can't really say anything. All this, and you can see it running through their mind, right? And now you've got like 2 or 3 seconds of interesting reaction shots, especially in dialogue scene, that you can plug in, because we interpret reaction shots based on the context that we're in, right? So, I mean, actors do good acting, and that's their job and whatnot, but you can pull some random shot of somebody like doing some weird thing with their eyes, and whatever the context is of the thing, we will interpret that as what a good filmmaker will make you interpret that the way they want you to, right? So if it's supposed to be shocking, you'll be like, oh, that's their shocked face. Or supposed to be in love, you can see them fall in love, but it could have been gas. Or it could have just literally been somebody waiting for that moment to say cut, which is why I do that sometimes. Anyway, the point of this is there will be 1 or 2 seconds, 3 seconds of things where she's not touching, bumping the table, where they'll be still. And in order to take care of the grain thing of having a still frame, I may have to take that, loop it, and then put that in a little mask on the side. So I will be coming back to After Effects whether I want to, or sorry, back to Fusion whether I want to or not. And in the meantime, I need to get this glasses thing done. So After Effects. All right, back to it. Yoink. So what happens here is I do some decently complicated expression stuff, and that basically creates a little null object, which are these little squares. And the initial one, the one that's moving, is attached to her nose. You can see it here as well. This one, in theory, from the tutorial I got, is supposed to act like the back of a stick that might be like through her head. So you put a null object here and a null object here, and now that HUD follows that stick, right? The problem is for that to work, there needs to be a front view. So it would work great for me. If I had like a big old HUD here and I was like, yoink, moving my head around, that's great. But when the head is sideways, or 3/4 in this case, as you can see, shit goes awry. Basically, it's a 2-dimensional object, and the tracking can't comprehend the 3-dimensionality of it very well. I could, I guess if I was skilled, rebuild her whole face in 3D and then set it there and do it that way or whatever. But what I do instead is I do the little tracking bit, and I could probably now do this a different way. I could probably just literally use a normal tracker for this. But for some reason, I feel like it kind of makes the stuff look like it's like spread out more or whatever. I don't know. I may experiment with that later, but for now, yeah. So I do the tracking bit, which I'll show you later on in the video, and then I attach her glasses lenses to the nose node as opposed to the head node, which is the one that's further back here. That one, I think. And then I have to go through basically and keyframe changes in the glasses, which I had to do in the Fusion version anyway, so no big deal. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So as I page through here, I kind of look for, so there it looks like it's sliding like way too far off to the side, right? Like her head barely moves and it all of a sudden is like clear out to there, which is kind of weird. And then it goes all sideways, right? So I've got my little keyframes down there set. We'll go to about here where her head stops, or right before it accelerates, I guess. And then I will grab this little slider. Oops, that's the wrong one. It's almost 50-50 that I'm going to get the wrong slider every single time. And then I'm going to go back to here just for a second and see that I put the red basically kind of halfway through her eye, and these are about at that little bit above. Her head really hasn't moved. Her eyebrows have moved. That's about it here, right? So I need to go about there, and I need to come down to about in here somewhere, and then do a little bit of a tilt. There we go. And in theory, probably a little bit of this kind of tilt, although that actually looks fine. So I'm not going to worry about that. Oops, I'm going to go ahead and redo. There we go. So then you come back here and you go, okay, that looks pretty good. Moves around a little bit. I've talked about this in other videos. You kind of want to get a nice first draft, and then you can kind of go back in and micromanage it if you need to. And then what happens is, as you can see in this previous one, I attach all the other objects to the lenses. So now when I have to go back and adjust something, I will default to adjusting the lenses. And then every once in a while, which it looks like I did with the text on this, because there's supposed to be a little text block. I think you can barely see it right there. And these, I like those turned outward a little bit. I think just adds a little more dimensionality. So those I moved a little bit independently on their own for aesthetic purposes, but they are all attached to the lenses so that they will bobble and bounce around with the lenses. So neat. One of the other things you may not have noticed, unless you're a big 3D connoisseur, is, whoops, that's not the right version, is in one of the earlier versions, which I think is this one. Yeah. So After Effects does not do true 3D objecting, or if it does, I haven't found it, or it's complicated. Regardless, in my mind, it doesn't do it. So what you get is this little globe right here is a 2D object. It's a 2D object, and it's called CC Sphere, I think. And you basically, it creates a fake sphere, and you wrap material around it in order to create something round. And you use it, a lot of people use it for globes and planets and whatnot. So you get a little map of the world, you apply it to the CC sphere, and it spherifies it, which is basically a 2D object pretending to be a 3D object. That's what that is. So as you come forward here, because it's now in 3 dimensions, you can see it get all squishy and weird right there, because it's a 2D object sitting on a plane. It's meant to be viewed from the front, and then as soon as you start turning it, it all goes fucking awry. So how I got around that, because as you can see there, it's pretty fucking round. Actually, let's go back to, here's the original clip. Now you can see, now you can't see shit. But there it's round, there it's round, there it's still round, right there. All right. So how that worked was, and it was pretty simple, I just left it as a 2D object. So there it is, no 3D object. So now it's always facing forward. And the idea then, it becomes that you are only able to manipulate it. Let's get back here. You're only able to manipulate it on 2 axes right here, the Y and the X, as opposed to the X, Y, and Z, right? So I have to kind of fake where it's at in the respect of like, oh, it looks like it's projected out in front because it's offset from the glasses to the side, and because there's all the other stuff around it, which is in 3D. So optical illusion, but it looks better than the janky, weird, squishy globe that I had before, which would have been way noticeable in like these close-ups. So once again, there's that part of it, and then you can see it starts going all off there, all akimbo. So I will end up keyframing all of this. I'll walk through for fun how I did the attachment bits. I exported out all the clips, and I used to think that I needed like full res, and then I do the effects and somehow export out full res and throw them back in. It's like, no. I exported out the equivalent of proxy clips. They're just mostly garbage, tiny file size. I brought them all in here. I'm going to do these animated graphics, and then I'm going to turn off the clip and export these graphics at an animation level export, and then put those clips back into the original on the original clips in the original timeline. That's how you do that. I was hoping that was the bonus of Fusion, and kind of the bonus of After Effects if I was working in Premiere. I was hoping for that dynamic link effect where I'd just be able to do the effects and they're just applied to the thing automatically. So this, to me, actually feels kind of old-fashioned or old school, but that's the way it had been done for hundreds of years before the Adobe suite came around. Well, I have them all in their individual clip folders, and then each clip folder has the composition that they appear in, and then I think that one I did a pre-comp. I don't think the rest of them I did, right? And then these are the clips that haven't been put into the clip folders yet, working my way down. Here's the Motion Cafe thing I was talking about. That's the project for that. This was the other project, so that's all the project files for that. This is a folder of various icons, superhero icons. If you've seen the other videos I've done, you've seen these in the Fusion version of it. But I illustrated all these little icon things, and I'll plug them in at a certain point, along with probably not this star band here. But anyway, so these are all graphics. These are the pings, which are these things here, which I applied. I think I applied, oh no. Did I apply a glow to these things? I did, okay. I applied a glow to them and I've been copying and pasting them, right? Yes, my glow is still applied. Okay, good. I was smart after all. These are a couple specific components out of these project files, but I'm going to be using them more. I basically pulled what I wanted and just left the rest of the project files. I was a little worried about deleting things, although it looks like I did delete a bunch out of this, just kept the solids. But sometimes when you delete the things, there's connections in there you don't know about and shit goes awry. What I think I'm going to do right now is create another folder. I like a very clean file structure. These two things aren't anything I'm going to be accessing anytime soon, so they're going to go away now. I kept a fancy square. I was doing some other HUD elements, which I could probably, speaking of keeping things clean, throw in the Oracle Graphics AI file. Yoink. There we go. And there's the lenses. I want to keep those out. I want to keep these out. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those will eventually get put into a folder. I can almost guarantee you. So there's that. All right. Anyway, so run 5. Meanwhile, back at the thing I said I was going to do a half an hour ago. Oops, there we go. All right, close these up. And here's 6. All right. So this is the next clip. I'm going to drag this down to make a composition. If you don't know how to make a composition, then you must just be watching this for the sound of my voice. If you know how to use After Effects, then you should know how to use a composition. That's a really nice front view, so this is going to be probably more like the actual good example. So you do a mask, and what you're doing here is you're outlining, or you're basically isolating the face, so the program isn't having to deal with all the shit around the face that doesn't matter. You'd hit M to open up your mask and right-click on Mask. And there's an option called Track Mask, which is right here. And basically Track Mask, clicking on it, opens up this thing over here, which I already had open. And then you have this little pull-down menu, which has positioning things to track or face tracking. So After Effects has some really nice face tracking software in it. And this is how to access it. And you have a little outline only or detailed features. You want detailed features should you decide to do a HUD someday on your fan series or whatever. Set rest pose gives it kind of it zeroes it out, I think, gives it kind of like a baseline that it wants to do, so I always do that. And then you've got these little controls up here. It's pretty easy. This is frame by frame. This is forward or backwards. I just blast the forward, and then it will start tracking, and you can see it put up all these little tracking points. And then the next thing you're going to do is you extract and copy the face measurements, which is a more detailed readout. So now I have face offsets and scale and orientation and a bunch of stuff like that. Checking my notes here. So I want to smooth stuff out a little bit because it can be a little jerky. So I'm bonk, which is an alt click. I'm using a Wacom tablet, So I have the Alt programmed in as one of my buttons in my little stylus. So the Alt click opened up, Alt clicked on the nose tip because the nose tip is what I'm going to mainly be using for tracking. And it opens up this little dialogue stuff and a bunch of stuff down here. And basically I use this little thing right here to do that, and then property, and then smooth, right? And it does it. It's all written right in here now. Now you're a coder. You know how to do code. And then open up face orientation, and I use the Z-axis. So Alt-click, opened it up. Property, smooth. Bam. All right. Now, we hit M twice. Oops, sorry, we hit E twice. And now I've got just my little two things that have the expressions on them, because those are the two things I'm using to do stuff with. And then it's time for my first null. A null object, which no one ever tells you this in tutorials about After Effects. They just fucking tell you to use them. A null object is like a fake, I don't know why they have to do it this way, but it's a fake little attachment point so that you can put information into it, but it's an invisible layer with an invisible safety pin or invisible push pin sort of stuck into it. And you can use nulls to do all kinds of crazy shit, basically. So I'm going to open up the position with the P key, just P key, and then after you do that, then you can hold down Shift to open up subsequent things underneath there. So Shift R is rotation, right? So now I have position and rotation opened up so that I don't, otherwise if you open them up, you get a whole bunch of stuff, right? And you may not want a whole bunch of stuff because it gets a little cluttery after a while. Position, oops. And see, I tried to hold Shift P, but the first one you have to open up just with the letter P and then Shift R. So there we go. Let's rename this nose tip, or nose node. I keep putting node in here, which is a resolve thing, but I actually kind of like nodes better, to be honest. All right, so that went the wrong direction, which may be the problem with the other one that I'm having. So position goes to nose tip. There we go. And rotation goes to orientation, Z. So now I have attached this node to this tracking data. And so now you can see the little node. I point at that screen like you can see that. So you can see it right here. And now it follows along on the tip of her nose. Isn't that cute, right? Also at this point, because you don't really need it anymore, I delete this mask. Bye-bye, mask. All right. Yay. All right. So that's that. Now we create a second node. Node. And that is under layer, as was the first one. New, null. Layer, new, and that's the downside of using a tablet sometimes, is on a 4K monitor you got to be really precise or blow my screen up, I guess. And this is going to be the head node. This is going to be the back end of the stick I was talking about. So if you imagine a stick through the head of the nose, we'll have stuff attached to it, and then back here will be static. And it'll be kind of an anchor point, and we'll get to that. All right, so now we're going to move this. I'm going to create a second view by coming down here and opening this up, and you can choose horizontal or vertical. I'll go horizontal. So now I have two different views, and then I'm going to make sure that this view is a top, or I'm not. What's going on here? Top view, please. Oh, one vitally important step I forgot about. After creating your nodes, you get to make them three-dimensional, 3D nodes. So there we go. So now as you scan through here, you can see this one here wiggling. That's the nose node. So the head node is this one. So I'm going to go back and to the left. Back and to the left. All right. So now There we go. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a cat on the couch snoring, and it's super adorable. This little error message is unrelated to the thing that I'm working on. It's deep in one of those other compositions, the one that I got from one of the dudes. There is a error in it where there's an expression that's defined with a certain word, and that word doesn't lead to anything, basically. I don't know whether, and it's, I think, French, I want to say. So it might meant to be the word cursor, but it's spelled with like an E and a U or something, or however they spell it. And I changed one or two of them to cursor, but that still didn't help. It's looking for an object or a thing called whatever that name is, and it's not finding it. So that's all of these errors, basically. All right, so now we have a top view where we've moved this back onto the z-axis, so this one is theoretically somewhere in the back of her head, and this one is in the front of her head. And then I'm going to go back to the singular view with the active camera set. All right, and then we're going to open this up, find orientation. Is that right? Expression orientation, yep. So we got our alt-click on orientation. We got our pull-down menu, because we want vector math, and we want look at. And look at is the thing that essentially creates the stick, right? And then, is that right? Is that on the right nose? Oh no, it's the nose. It's the nose node. So hold that thought. We'll back up here. All right. We actually want to do this. We want to do position here. And this is the one we want the orientation on. So this is why you watch, to see me fuck up and then go back and change things. So the nose node expression, vector math, right? So, and what's this going to do, again, is create the little stick. So all this, it's nice if you know how to do expression code. I don't that much. There are tons of tutorials about it. Expressions are the things that open up After Effects to be really super powerful. So learning that, if you want to do special effects, obviously is a must. For casual users like myself, you get away with knowing a few things, like wiggle, for example, is an expression that makes things jitter randomly, or makes things slide randomly, or basically just creates random movement. That's a good one to kind of figure out how to use, because you find yourself using it on a regular basis. So this, I'm going to basically just highlight the from point, and that's going to be the nose null position. So we're defining where the look at is. Basically, it's going from here to there, right? So I'm going to grab this little pick doodad, and then I'm going to go to position. And now transform.position means that the from is the nose, right? And then I'm going to grab the at point, and then I'm going to grab the same little pickwick thing and put that on position on the head node, right? And now it's looking at the head node. Now in theory, see, the little head node stays there, and the little nose node moves around and does stuff. So then when I come over here, and I always do this, I need to have like a clean fucking set of glasses, because I need those. Because I grab these glasses and they already have like marks from previous stuff there. So bam. So obviously this isn't any good, right? Oops. So we're going to go position, scale, rotation. Those should be all the things that have, is that right? Oh, have I 3D'd it? Yeah. Oh, it's further on, because this is such a short clip. Duh. All right. So let's grab these. And then let's reset all that. All right. So now, just for fun, 0 tab, I think. So what I'm doing now is I'm basically resetting these things to a 0. There we go. And then I'll drag them over to her. And then use this first frame. They're a little small. Oops, this is gonna. It's been doing this weird thing where once I use the hand tool, it won't de-hand. I have to hit the button again. I wonder if that's a mouse, or I wonder if that's a tablet thing. I'll hold the tool and, all right, which is essentially the space bar. I have the front little rocker switch programmed for the space bar. Oh, now it's working okay, but sometimes it doesn't switch back. All right, so I've got this thing here. This is the Z, so that looks pretty good. It used to be a little bigger than the glasses. Maybe right in there somewhere. Slightly off center. And then she's barely turned, so nope. Oh, I can see actually about how much she is. Nope. Oh, it's this one, that's right. So that's probably fine. There we go. The scale should be a little higher. Yeah, and then once it's scaled up, then it's going to need to go sideways, back over to here. Middle of her nose is probably like right there. And then we can tilt this a little more. Not too much more though. Kind of eyeballing it. Cool. And then, see, now that it's forward, I might end up having to shrink it back down again. But that's basically what goes on. So I'm going to set this thing the way that I want it perfectly, or, you know, close to perfect. There we go. And then I'm going to attach it to the nose node. And you can see it kind of goes awry off there. Because what it's doing is it's following this other square. But because, again, she's not total front view, it basically just goes akimbo. So there's probably, this, like I say, this original tutorial that I found somewhere was a person kind of looking into the camera and just turning left and right for the most part on a single axis. So I wouldn't say that this is the best tutorial as far as what I'm doing. Like I say, I should probably mess around with just regular tracking, just track her nose and attach that to it because I'm going to have to keyframe anyway. But the face tracking is really good. It works when like her hands come up in front of her face, which the regular tracking doesn't. And the keyframing is not super horrible. Like it's going to be, oh, I don't need to do that. It's not. It's you know, it's not an insurmountable thing. It's going to be a little tedious doing like a shitload of face tracking over the next year of my life. No, it won't be a year. Over the next few months of my life, but it's not that big of a deal. What's interesting is this looks kind of balanced on the bottom, but it doesn't look balanced on the top as far as this tilt. So I think I'm going to have to make it look balanced on the top. Yeah, so that looks okay there. And see, that kind of still looks okay there, and it starts going awry right about in there, right? So I may end up, you know, starting from about right there and readjusting it and readjust. I mean, this is so short. It says 17 frames, and that sounds about right. Or no, there's 17, 19, 21. There's a second. So it's maybe 2 seconds long, second and change. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. And the rest of this is basically going to be me working and doing that. And actually, I think I'll probably turn off the stream because I don't have, obviously, a shitload of people clamoring for me to do live streams. So we'll just consider this a tutorial, and I'll edit it down and put it up, and then leave the live stream up in the regular thing. So if you're watching the recording of the live stream to see if there's any secret information at the end, thank you very much. And there isn't. For the rest of you who are just watching the edited down version, thanks. And tune in again. Don't forget to subscribe.